Search the history books for the Battle of Belmont, and you will find two distinct battlefields. One sits on the banks of the Mississippi River, the other is 8,000 miles away on the South African veldt. In November 1861, the American Civil War version featured a clash of unconventional leaders. The Union forces were led by a newly promoted Ulysses S. Grant, while the Confederates were commanded by Leonidas Polk, a man who entered the war wearing clerical robes as an Episcopal bishop. 38 years later, in November 1899, the British Army arrived at a different Belmont. They were led by Lord Methuen and the prestigious Guards Brigade, officers who carried the weight of centuries of tradition on their gold epaulets. Though separated by decades and oceans, both battles shared the same starting point. They were led by commanders who believed their training and superior status would make the coming fight a formality. Both Grant and the Huen were launching early war offensives to relieve sieges. They were confident, conventionally trained, and certain that their advance would face little resistance. The British Guards Brigade approached South Africa as if they were on a parade ground. They carried ceremonial maces and wore towering bearskin hats, prepared for a type of pageantry that had no place in modern combat. The Union recruits in Missouri were the opposite. They were green and unproven, marching in awkwardly aligned rows as they headed toward their very first taste of live fire. Crucially, neither commander knew what they were marching into. Grant lacked the cavalry needed to scout the cornfields of Missouri, while Methuen was forced to rely on maps that were dangerously inaccurate. Deploying an army based on theoretical tactics without proper reconnaissance ensured that both forces were marching directly into the fog of war. Picking up the pace, the rigid plans quickly collided with the terrain. Grant's men had to scramble off vulnerable steamboats onto a muddy riverbank, while Methuen's force struggled through a delayed night march that left them exposed at daybreak. In 1861, the Union lines were forced into a chaotic firefight. The recruits stood in rigid rows, firing their muskets into thick clouds of black powder smoke that quickly obscured the entire cornfield. In 1899, the technology had changed, but the results were just as chaotic. The British Guards charged up a steep, rocky hillside under the fire of modern Mauser rifles, weapons that used smokeless powder, making the enemy nearly impossible to see. The Boer militias fought with an instinctive style that the British were unprepared for. Dressed in slouch hats and civilian clothes, they abandoned formal military lines to fire from behind the natural cover of the rocks. These assaults proved that parade ground formations cannot survive against an entrenched enemy using modern firearms and natural cover. Despite the chaos, both attacking forces managed to break through. Grant's men overran the Confederate camp, and Methuen's guards reached the summit of Gun Hill with fixed bayonets. But the initial success in 1861 was short-lived. Grant's inexperienced soldiers lost their discipline the moment the enemy fled, breaking ranks to cheer and loot the camp instead of securing their position. As the Union troops celebrated, Confederates ferried reinforcements across the river to surround them. In South Africa, Methuen's men found the summit empty. The Boers hadn't been routed. They fell back to a higher ridge, forcing a new line of fire. In both centuries, the attacking force had walked blindly into an entrapment zone. Grant was forced into a desperate retreat, escaping the encircling Confederates by sliding his horse down a muddy riverbank to reach the last departing steamboat. Methuen held the hill, but his victory was hollow. His men were exhausted, and the Boers remained a threat just a few miles away. The British lacked the sheer volume of cavalry needed to pursue a mobile enemy. This small number of lancers could do little more than watch as the Boers rode away to fight another day. Without mobility and situational awareness, a tactical breakthrough rarely results in a strategic victory. The aftermath of these two Belmonts was identical. In both 1861 and 1899, both sides claimed they had won, despite suffering heavy casualties. Neither battle broke the sieges they were intended to relieve, and neither engagement altered the broader map of the war. For Grant, the struggle at Belmont changed his understanding of leadership. He learned that successful command depends less on a perfect plan than on a general's reaction to chaos and enemy countermoves. Ultimately, these battles demonstrate a constant reality of the battlefield. Beyond the specific weapons or the era, the deciding force remains the fog of war.